So in the previous section we've heard Odysseus wondering what to do and deciding that he has to investigate where he's been washed up and what this sound was which has woken him. And we had some direct speech in the previous section, and therefore at the end of that direct speech, in our first line here, we have Ho's Apone having spoken thus. Noble Odysseus emerged from under hypoduomai. Notice the force of the prefix hupo there, emerged from under, and it takes the genitive, and the genitive here is thamnon in actual fact, which is bushes. Having spoken thus, noble Odysseus emerged from under the bushes. Dios is a very common adjective to describe Odysseus, and it's usually translated as noble. And it is a bit odd here, isn't it? There's an interesting juxtaposition between emerging from the bushes and noble Odysseus. This doesn't sound like a particularly noble act, but one of the lessons, I think, of the Odyssey is that sometimes nobility can be concealed behind abject humility, and this is what happens here. Odysseus emerges rather like a tramp. He probably looks like a tramp, a castaway, but he is still, as we know, noble. Noble Odysseus emerged from under the bushes, and that's the de in the second line, from the thick wood, from the dense wood. Here's the verb, cladsto. He broke off with his strong hand. Notice how strong is at the end of the line there, emphasized. With his strong hand, he broke off a branch. There's the word, ptorthon, a branch. But we have to connect that word ptorthon with phulon at the beginning of the next line. He broke off a branch of leaves. I suppose it's a genitive plural. You could say a leafy branch, I suppose. So from the dense wood, he broke off with his strong hand a branch of leaves. Notice at the end of this second line here, you've got a kappa, cladsto, and then you've got two chi's, and these guttural sounds are in actual fact a bit of onomatopoeia. We're meant to hear this wood snapping, cracking. So Odysseus broke off a branch of leaves in order to conceal. What we have here is a purpose clause. It's usually in prose, it's hose and a future participle. What we've got here is hose and an optative, in order to conceal. Now, what's he going to conceal? In order to conceal the genitals, merdea, it's a neuter plural, the genitals of a man, photos is a genitive there, phos, photos, on his body. So it's interesting that Odysseus' first reaction here is to attempt to conceal his nakedness. The Homer, in actual fact, emphasises here at the end of the line the genitals of a man. So he is concealing his male genitalia on his body. Whether now this is this modesty on the part of Odysseus? I think it's probably just, whoever he's going to confront, he wants to appear as presentable as he can in his washed up castaway state. But at least he can conceal his nakedness. Okay, line 130. Bear. He went. It's the aorist of bino. You know the aorist of bino. A bear, a bear. The augment is omitted as often in Homer. I think we're going to say something like, he proceeded to go. Imen. It doesn't look like it, but in actual fact it's the infinitive of Amy, I go. He proceeded to go. And then we have our second simile here. The first one was Nausicaa compared with the goddess Artemis. Now Odysseus is compared with a lion, like a lion, leon. And this line is Odyssey trophos, mountain bred. Rather a good compound adjective. Like a mountain bred lion, confident in his strength. Alky's a dative there. Now remember, with similes you have to always be alert to the correspondences between the simile and the narrative proper. Now Odysseus is the lion, and I suppose initially we can suggest that a lion is strong, powerful. Interestingly enough, Odysseus had emerged from the bushes, remember, rather like, I suppose, what a lion would do as well. We can also, if you think about a lion's mane, we can also suggest that Odysseus is probably long-haired and unshaven. It's interesting that in Homer there are a number of lion similes, and they usually describe warriors going into battle, heroes going into battle. And here, because Odysseus is not going into battle, he's been woken up by these female screams rather than a warrior shouting, and he's not going to confront Trojan battle-hardened warriors. He's going to confront some teenage girls, and he hasn't got a shield. He's got a branch of leaves to protect him. There's a bit of this is humour in actual fact. Homer is intending his reader to be amused. The lion is usually a warrior going into battle. Here it's Odysseus going to confront some teenage girls, and there is a certain, it's what we would call mock heroic. There is some humour here. So he proceeded to go like a lion, like a mountain-bred lion, confident in his strength. Which this is Amy Ebo, Amy I go, which goes, which proceeds, shall we say. Now this is rained on and hit by wind. I think we'll probably say hit by rain and hit by wind. So this is a lion that is drenched, is bedraggled. It's been hit by a storm of rain, a storm of wind. Now this of course corresponds very clearly to the shipwrecked Odysseus, who himself is bedraggled and drenched. So there's some very clear correspondences there between the simile and the narrative. So this line, which proceeds, hit by rain and hit by wind, and in him, this hoi is the Homeric equivalent of autoi, the dative of autos, and it's a very unusual usage. I think we've had it before. And in him, osse are his eyes. His eyes, here's the verb, flash. And notice how that verb's been enjambed. So what Homer is saying is that this isn't a happy lion. He's drenched, he's been buffeted by winds, but despite this, his spirit is strong, and we see this lion's spirit in his eyes, which flash. And this tells us something then, of course, about Odysseus. Odysseus is not in a happy state at the moment. He's about at his lowest possible ebb, but yet his spirit is strong, and we can imagine, we can see that in his eye too. So what does the lion do? I think we'll just say autar is just a connective, and we'll say and. You could say but, whichever sounds better, I think. I don't think there's much adversative sense here. We'll say and. And the lion, this verb metekomai is I suppose to go after. We'll say pursue, and it takes a dative. And the lion pursues cattle or sheep or wild deer. Why does this lion go after cattle or deer or sheep or wild deer? Well, I think we would say something like gar, for. The Greek just says and, de. You might want to say for. Here's the word gaster, his stomach, like gastric. His stomach, this is kelomai, but think of keluo. His stomach orders him. This single he here is auton, it's Homeric. For his stomach compels him. What does his stomach compel him to do? Well, here's the infinitive in actual fact, elthein, to go. But I think we're going to say to try to go, even into the well-made pyukinos, the well-made, well, it's house of the sheep. Now, sheep, sheep don't have a house. The usual word in actual fact is a fold, F-O-L-D. For his stomach compels him to try to go even into the well-made fold, merlone, genitive plural, of the sheep, of the flocks. It's like a sort of fox, I suppose, actually going into the hen coop. And the fox is taking a risk. He risks being seen by the farmer. And this is the same thing here. The lion is taking a risk entering the farm. He may confront the farmer. That's the force of the kai, I think, here, isn't it? Even into the well-made fold of the sheep. That's how far his hunger drives him. So this is a desperate lion, hungry, as we imagine Odysseus to be, wet and winded. So that's the end of the simile in actual fact. It starts here in line 130 and it goes on for 5 lines. Quite an extended simile, and remember you've got to see the correspondences between the simile and the narrative. So here we have, at the end of a simile, we have hose in just such a way, and that tells us at the beginning of line 135 that the simile is ended and the narrative is resuming. So in such a way, Odysseus, here's the verb, emele, was about to, mellow, was about to, and here's the infinitive, future infinitive. You can see the xi in the middle there, because mellow takes a future infinitive. In such a way, Odysseus was about to, I think we'll probably say encounter, to encounter the girls, takes a dative, mignumi, to encounter the girls, and the girls are euplokamoisi, beautiful haired, the beautiful haired girls. And it's interesting there, if we remember, if we assume that Odysseus is bedraggled, there is quite a contrast here between Odysseus and these beautiful haired girls, and Homer emphasizes that contrast. So he was about to encounter the girls, gumnos per eon. Now per is going to be kaipa, sort of although being naked. Eon is just own. Although he was naked. For this is the noun creo. It's a nominative. It doesn't look a nominative, but it is, and it's necessity. You know the impersonal verb cre. It is necessary. Well, this is the noun necessity. For necessity, it's an aorist, but we'll say for necessity had come upon him. There's nothing you can do. He's got no option. So 137, smerdaleos, an adjective, first word, emphasized. It means terrifying to them. Notice it's feminine, you can see with the eta. Terrifying to them, ephaner, the augments omitted, he appeared. So I think we'd say Odysseus appeared terrifying to them. Kekakomenos, disfigured, halmei, by the sea water. Now, I suppose, just as a lion, if a lion had turned up, they would have been terrified. So Odysseus himself appears, at any rate, terrifying to them. Notice these three kappas in kekakomenos, those gutturals there are, well, you can't sort of say it's onomatopoeia because being disfigured by the seawater there's no sound to replicate, but you can say that it's expressive, and those kappas there, those gutturals, express the disfigurement of Odysseus. He appeared terrifying to them, he appeared, disfigured by the sea water. And they ran, tresan, first word, emphasised. This is their reaction. Notice they don't hang around to ask questions, they just run. And I suppose the verb there at the beginning, first word, emphasizes the meaning, but it also emphasizes the immediacy of the girl's reaction. They just run. Aludis aller, one this way, one that way. They go off in different directions over the jutting shore. So the maids run, one this way, one that. But alone the daughter of Alcinous remained. And notice that de at the beginning of 139 is very strongly adversative. The daughter of Alcinous, however, alone remained. And notice how the oyer, first word, is heavily emphasized. And what we can see is that the other girls, the maids, they run, but the daughter of Alcinous, the princess who has royal blood in her veins, unlike the maids, she is a true daughter of a king, and she stands her ground. Now, in Homer, whenever a hero on the battlefield displays a particular courage, Homer will often say that a god had put courage in his heart to explain the particular courage that he has shown. And just in that way, Homer here says, for Athene had put, Tharsos is a neuter noun, and Tharsos is the accusative, had put courage in her heart. For Athene had put courage in her heart, and taken fear from her limbs, out of her limbs. So this phrase, therefore, does not detract from Nausicaa's courage. On the contrary, it elevates her to the status of a true heroine. And then we have an interesting line, 141. She stood. First word, the augment is omitted, Esther. She stood, and she stood opposite him, Scomener, holding her ground. No, that monosyllable, stare, at the beginning of the line is very emphatic. She doesn't run away. She stood opposite him, holding her ground. And Odysseus considered. Now just look at 149. The punctuation shows, 141. The punctuation shows you where the caesura is. It's the colon there. And what you have here is a feminine half and a masculine half. You've got Nausicaa in the first half, and the Scomener, the eater at the end of Scomener, confronts the masculine, Hoder, at the beginning of the second half of the line. So that clear division of the line into a feminine first half and a masculine second half is a nice verbal way, a clever verbal way, in which Homer shows the confrontation between the man and the woman. And Odysseus considered. Now remember, Odysseus is his main characteristic in both of Homer's poems is that of a thoughtful, analytical man. He thinks, he's clever, he doesn't rely just upon his brawn and his might and his sword. He uses his brain. And we had earlier on Odysseus, when he first awoke, his first thing is hormino, I think was the verb. He considered. Here's another verb, murmuridzo, to ponder, to think. Now this is typical of Odysseus. And by the same token, throughout the Odyssey, Odysseus's most characteristic weapon is not his sword or his spear, but his words. He uses clever words, and he's going to do the same here. Odysseus considered whether is air at the beginning of 142, and or is at the beginning of 143. He considered, and those two conjunctions, whether or, show the two possibilities which Odysseus thinks about. Whether, this is the verb lissomai, and we usually translate it as to entreat. It's to beg, to beg for mercy, or to beg a favour. Whether he should entreat the beautiful girl, having taken hold of her knees. Now this seems an odd phrase, but in the ancient world this was how you would supplicate. A suppliant is somebody who begs. The verb is sometimes supplicate, and supplication, the usual way of supplication was to kneel before somebody and touch their knees. Now this gesture, I suppose, symbolized submission and inferior status, and it was a way then that you could beg for mercy or beg a favour. So it's a standard practice. You often find warriors who are defeated on the battlefield supplicating the victorious warrior, and they would touch his knees. And this is one possibility, but Odysseus is quite shrewd, and he concludes that if he were to touch the knees of this girl, it could be misconstrued. The girl could obviously think that this was some sort of sexual threat, and it's open to misinterpretation, shall we say? And Odysseus decides that such an approach would not work in this instance. Whether he should entreat the beautiful girl by taking hold of her knees, or, in the penultimate line here, or whether he should entreat, here's the verb repeated again, apostada, standing at a distance. You see the standing in the stada, you see apo, from, standing at a distance, autos, just as he was. Here is the phrase epeesin melikioisi. Now they are dative plurals, and epos is a word, and melikios is an interesting adjective. It's going to mean something like gentle, conciliatory words, with gentle words. Notice how the adjective is put at the end of the line, where it's emphatic, with words conciliatory. So whether he should entreat the beautiful girl by taking hold of her knees, or he should entreat her standing at a distance, just as he was, with conciliatory words. A, in the last line here, usually means if, but we're going to say in the hope that she might show him the city, polis, and give him clothes. So that's where the section ends. Now we don't know what decision Odysseus is going to make. We find that out in the next section. But he's going to dismiss the idea of supplicating the maiden, and he's going to speak to her and persuade her and convince her with his conciliatory words.